Central to America's rise to global leadership is our Judeo-Christian tradition, with its vision of the goodness and possibilities of every human life. The American culture promotes personal responsibility, the dignity of work, the merit of service, devotion to a purpose greater than self, and at the foundation, the preeminence of family. In this life, the commitments that come closest to forever are those of family.
I was speaking with one of these business owners who owns a couple of restaurants in town, and he said, you know, I'd like to change the Constitution. I'm not sure I can do it, he said, but I'd like to have a provision in the Constitution that in addition to the age of the president and the citizenship of the president and the birthplace of the president being set by the Constitution, I'd like it also to say that the president has to spend at least 3 years working in business before he can become president of the United States.
After initially struggling to find investors, Romney traveled to Miami in 1983 to win pledges of $9 million, 40% of Bain's startup money. Some investors had extensive ties to the death squads responsible for the vast majority of the tens of thousands of deaths in El Salvador during the 80s. The investors include the Salvador family, whose former U.S. ambassador to El Salvador, Robert White, has previously accused of directly funding the Salvadoran paramilitaries. In his memoir, former Bain executive Harry Strawn writes, Romney pushed aside his own misgivings about the investors to accept their backing. Strawn writes, quote, these Latin American friends have loyally rolled over investments in succeeding funds, actively participated in Bain's Capital's May investor meetings, and are still today one of the largest investor groups in Bain Capital. Well, for more, we're joined by Ryan Grimm in Washington, D.C., bureau chief for the Huffington Post. He's connecting the dots in the latest story headlined, Mitt Romney started Bain Capital with money from families tied to death squads. Ryan, welcome to Democracy Now! If you could carefully lay out the story and set the stage in El Salvador in the early 80s, what was happening there, the carnage?
In 1980, there was land reform instituted by the El Salvadoran government that started to parcel up some of the farms, some of the coffee plantations, and the other land holdings of the elite, and they also nationalized the international coffee trade. So they didn't nationalize the industry, but just the foreign export of it. And so the oligarchs responded with a vicious and a brutal campaign that included death squads, and in the first year or two killed something like 35,000 people, and over the course of a decade killed about 70,000 people. The UN has since calculated that about 85% of the killing was done by these right-wing death squads. So this is not one of those dirty wars where both sides were equally culpable. And the leader of this movement, Roberto D'Aubuisson, was very public about his support of death squads.
I'd like to make an appeal in a special way to the men in the army. Brothers, each one of you is one of us. We are the same people. The farmers and peasants that you kill are your own brothers and sisters. When you hear the words of a man telling you to kill, think instead in the words of God. Thou shalt not kill. No soldier is obliged to obey an order contrary to the law of God. In his name, and in the name of our tormented people who have suffered so much and whose laments cry out to heaven, I implore you, I beg you, I order you, stop the repression!
That's a clip from the film Romero of Raul Julia, who played Salvadoran Archbishop Oscar Romero. Oscar Romero was gunned down March 24th, 1980. Ryan Grimm, talk about how he died and the connection to your story.
Sure. He was assassinated the day after the clip that you played, shot through the heart while delivering mass. And we since know conclusively that his assassination was ordered by Roberto D'Aubuisson. D'Aubuisson, 18 months later, would found the Arena Party, which was basically at the time a vehicle for these death squads. There was really no separation between Arena and death squads. So Mitt Romney, in this context, knew very well what was happening in El Salvador. The U.S. ambassador Tom White, who you mentioned, Robert White had publicly accused 6 Salvadorans living in Miami of financing, 2 of them Salaverias. It's very clear that he knew the context. He knew what was going on at the time. He flew to Miami, and in mid-'84, he went directly to a bank and met with a number of these families who were involved with death squads, and accepted what at the time was a huge amount of money. It amounted to 40% of the outside capital that he was able to raise for that initial fund. And as Harry Strawn said, they continued to roll over their investments, and certainly are worth tens and tens of millions of dollars in Bain capital now.
Just reading from your piece, Ryan Grimm, when Romney returned to Miami in 2007 to launch another venture that needed funding, his first presidential campaign, Romney said, quote, "I owe a great deal to Americans of Latin American descent. When I was starting my business, I came to Miami to find partners that would believe in me and that would finance my enterprise." And Ryan Grimm, Mitt Romney's response to your investigation and to these allegations.
Right. What they did is they sent me a paragraph of an article from the Salt Lake Tribune in 1999 that read, as was Bain's policy with any big investor, they had the families checked out as diligently as possible. They uncovered no unsavory links to drugs or other criminal activity. Now, that's simply impossible to believe. These families were certainly connected to death squads. There's no possible way that anybody in 1984 could check out these families, which is the term they use, these families, and come away convinced that this money was clean.
You quote Robert White saying the Salaverria family was very well known. Now, Robert White was the U.S. ambassador to El Salvador. The Salaverria family was very well known as backers of D'Aubuisson. These guys were big money contributors. They were total backers of D'Aubuisson and the extremist solution, including death squads. And I wanted to read an excerpt from Greg Grandin's book, Empire's Workshop. He's a professor of Latin American history at New York University. He writes, "The problem was that the military groups had very little popular support, due in large part to the fact that they were preternaturally violent. According to Reagan's own ambassador, Robert White, their solution to the crisis was apocalyptic. The country must be destroyed totally, the economy must be wrecked, unemployment must be massive, and a cleansing of some 300,000 or 400,000 or 500,000 people must be carried out," he says, and he is quoting Robert White. You know, we're talking about, as you said, tens of thousands of people remembering 20 years ago the killing of the 6 Jesuit priests in 1989. And then there was the killing of the 4 American nuns. All of these part of the casualties of, as you said, the Salvadoran military and paramilitary overwhelmingly doing the killing. Are these families still donating to Romney's current presidential campaign as they did to his first effort?
I didn't find any of them doing so. They can continue to be significant investors in Bain Capital.
Mitt Romney, whose life is a perfect example of the kinds of leadership and experience you need at a time like this. It is so unique how the man and the moment have met one another.
The company was Damon Clinical Laboratories. In 1989, Mitt Romney's company led a takeover of the medical testing outfit. Romney would manage the company and serve on its board of directors. Under Romney's direction, the company was making huge profits. But as Forbes magazine reported, Romney was supervising a medical testing company guilty of massive Medicare fraud.
At a time when money is tighter than ever, this kind of fraud is costing Americans as much as $90 billion a year.
The company was misleading doctors, ordering complex and unnecessary blood tests, not disclosing to doctors that Damon Corporation was billing Medicare at a much higher rate for each unnecessary test. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office, under Romney, the number of tests billed to Medicare on an annual basis skyrocketed. Medicare paid more than $16 million for unnecessary iron deficiency tests alone. But it didn't stop there. In order to ensure doctors wouldn't complain, the company made it difficult for them to receive a coronary risk profile for patients if they didn't go along. For busy doctors caring for their patients, there was little choice. The tests were ordered, and the Damon Corporation would issue another fraudulent bill to Medicare.
We've got to attack the rampant fraud that exists in numerous government programs.
The illegal activity was happening right under Romney's nose. Romney kept a watchful eye on profits, while tens of millions of dollars in illegal Medicare money flowed through the door.
One of the ways I'll do that is by enacting far stiffer penalties for those who steal from taxpayers.
But under Romney, Damon Corporation was the one stealing from taxpayers. The scheme wasn't going completely unnoticed. A task force of federal officials had launched Operation Lab Scam to investigate clinical laboratories who they suspected of fraudulent Medicare billing. Squarely in their sights, Mitt Romney's Damon Corporation. While federal agents under the U.S. Attorney's Office were busy closing in on Damon Corporation, Romney was busy orchestrating a sale of Damon to Corning. Finally, a 7-page subpoena was served on the Damon corporate headquarters on August 24, 1993. In an incredible coincidence shown in SEC filings, Romney's company sold Damon to Corning in August 1993. At the very same time, the Fed subpoena was issued. 2 whistleblowers came forward under Corning, and Medicare fraud charges were brought. The systemic fraud under Romney's reign finally ended. The Boston Globe reported Romney was completely unaware of any investigation. But later, Romney changed his story, claiming that he helped uncover the fraud and the illegal activity, asking the board's lawyers to investigate, saying the board took corrective action. But both federal investigators and Corning rebuffed Romney's claims, stating that Corning stopped the fraud, not Mitt Romney. In fact, Romney never reported the fraudulent Medicare activities to authorities. In 1996, the Damon Corporation pled guilty to defrauding Medicare. Damon was ordered to pay the U.S. government $119 million to resolve all federal and Medicaid criminal and civil claims. The government said the settlement covered literally millions of fraudulent claims. At the time, it was the largest criminal fine for healthcare fraud ever levied in Massachusetts history. Incredibly, when Romney's firm orchestrated a sale of Damon Corporation to Corning Incorporated, it tripled its investment, walking away with a $12 million profit. The Boston Globe reports Romney personally pocketed $500,000 from the deal. In a now familiar Mitt Romney refrain, thousands lost their jobs and the company went bankrupt. Cost to American taxpayers, the Boston Globe put the figure at nearly $40 million. Just 10 years later, no one might suspect Mitt Romney had been at the center of one of the greatest Medicare frauds of the 1990s.
I can't wait to get my hands on Washington.
One longtime reporter for the Boston Globe and co-author of the new biography, The Real Romney, put it this way.
I certainly think that there's reason to question, if you're looking at sort of who he is politically, sort of what he really is inside.
Even more troubling, Romney denies his business ever had any dealings at all with Medicare.
Did Bain ever do any work with any company which did any work with the government like Medicare?
We didn't do any work with the government.
Mitt Romney has said repeatedly he left his private investment firm, Bain Capital, in 1999.
I left that business in 1999.
But this Bain Capital filing at the Securities and Exchange Commission shows Romney as the CEO and president of the company in 2001, 2 years after the GOP contender says he left the firm.
Either Mitt Romney, through his own words and his own signature, was misrepresenting his position at Bain to the SEC, which is a felony, or he was misrepresenting his position at Bain to the American people.
The Obama campaign says the SEC documents are crucial because they proved Romney was at Bain when the firm was advising companies on outsourcing.
Newly published documents show Mitt Romney's firms were pioneers at helping companies outsource their manufacturing.
The Washington Post revealed that under Romney, Bain Capital encouraged companies to move jobs overseas. Actually, Romney was a pioneer in the industry. The Washington Post discovered that Bain pushed to export jobs at companies like IBM, HP, Dell, and Lucent. Bain made money by encouraging these companies to move jobs overseas while Romney was in charge.
They just don't know how jobs are created in the private sector. That's where I spent my entire career. I learned how America competes with companies in other countries, why jobs leave.
Here's what former Reagan budget director David Stockman had to say about Romney's business experience.
I don't think that Mitt Romney can legitimately say that he learned anything about how to create jobs in the LBO business. The LBO business is about how to strip cash out of old, long-in-the-tooth companies and how to make short-term profits
David,
for investors.
He had so many new jobs created for all the jobs that were lost. It was a net gain, no?
I don't think so. All the jobs that he talks about came from Staples. That was a very early venture stage deal that they got out of long before it got to its current size.
People are going to hear the story of how Mitt Romney took over companies, fired workers, rehired some of them at lower wages, took away their benefits, took out huge fees, and then those companies in many cases went belly up.
You worked harder than ever before and put in longer hours. Or when you lost that job that paid $22.50 an hour with benefits, you took 2 jobs at $9 an hour.
The whole notion, and by the way, this guy who was against the bailout of the auto industry and saving the auto industry, in one case, left a company behind. The federal government had to spend $44 million bailing out the pension fund, after Romney and his partners made millions.
Bob, you also wrote today that Romney should release the records of all Bain transactions from which he profited. Explore that with us.
If he's going to make this claim about all the jobs created, Fox is going to say net jobs created, let's put the records out there. Let's not talk about character assassination. Let's talk about facts. Character assassination, it was this guy himself who put his Bain job record front and center. He said that's his claim to the presidency. And David Stockman is absolutely right. Leverage buyouts, or in the way Romney practiced them, vulture capitalism, are not a qualification for creating jobs. His attitude, Romney's attitudes in Bain, connect directly with what he wants to do to teachers. This is a guy who took away health benefits from people. Now he wants to end Medicare as we know it. This is a mega millionaire with an offshore bank account. Now he wants to give huge tax cuts to millionaires. You can just go down the list. Every single thing connects to this story.
A February 1999 Boston Herald report about Romney leaving for the Olympics. Romney said he will stay on as part-timer with Bain, providing input on investment in key personnel decisions. Well, in July of 1999, Romney was identified as the boss in a Bain press release about the departure of 2 executives. Bain Capital CEO W. Willard, that means, Mitt Romney, currently on part-time leave of absence to head the Salt Lake City Olympic Committee for the 2002 Games, said, while we will miss Jeff and Mark, we wish them well and look forward to working with them as they build their new firm. Well, Romney was on part-time leave for 3 years. All the while, he collected a paycheck and benefited from the company's investments.
Now, he was CEO, chairman of the board, sole owner, and sole shareholder. We're supposed to believe that he didn't have any involvement with any of these companies. You know, a new report has emerged tonight in sworn testimony in 2002. Romney said that he left Salt Lake to travel back to Massachusetts to appear at board meetings. And so the suggestion that he's not involved in any of this, that he's legally responsible but not personally responsible, simply isn't credible.
New York Times recently had a really interesting article about Bain at the time that Mitt Romney used to run it. So I wanted to simplify it for you guys and break it down so that everybody can understand it. What kind of fees did they charge? Well, this is where it gets a little comical. They would charge a fee to the company for buying the company. Because once they have controlling interest, they can charge whatever the hell they like. It's going straight into their pocket. They would also, of course, have a fee for managing the company. They'd have a fee if they invested more money in the company. They'd have a fee if they took more money out of the company. They'd have a fee if they bought smaller companies for the larger company. And finally, they'd have a fee for selling the company. So now, after they've taken all those fees out, if the investors made a couple of bucks or the company itself also had some profit, great. If they didn't, who cares? In fact, let's show you a couple of examples. All right, first one is a simple one. It's GS Industries. And they purchased it for $8.3 million. That's why they're called leveraged buyouts, because they put in $8.3 million and then they get a lot more loans on top to be able to buy the company from the original owner. And after they got all those loans, they paid themselves a dividend of $33.9 million. In fact, they took out a debt of $125 million. So here's the interesting part about dividends, right? Because once they take the $125 million from the bank to put into the company, now if it was your company, what you would do is you would invest in the company. Maybe you buy plants, you hire more workers so that the company can make more money down the road. But oftentimes that's not what Bain did. Bain would take about $34 million of money and put it in their pocket. And they go, I already made money on this. Now if the company goes bankrupt, who cares? I put in 8.3, I made 33.9. They're right. For them, it doesn't matter at all. In fact, what happened to GS Industries? They went bankrupt. Now, everybody that worked there, they lost their jobs. So if you had a pension there, sad day for you. If that was your job, sad day for you. If you were an investor, sad day for you. But Bain makes money either way. Even a larger case, Cambridge Industries. Okay? Now, we're going to break this down even more. So they declared bankruptcy in May of 2000. Now, this was a company that Bain bought and managed. So they had taken out $300 million in debt. So the guys who gave them the debt got screwed. They got $15.7 million from outside investors. Those investors screwed. They lost all their money. Okay? And even Bain had put in money, $2.2 million. And so they lost that too. Now, if all you saw was this, you say, hey, look, sometimes businesses go up, sometimes they go down, everybody lost. That's capitalism for you. That's what I would say, right? But that's not all. Now let's take another look at another slide here. So what happened in the bankruptcy? Well, here comes the fees. Bain collected $2.25 million as a transaction fee for when they first bought the company. But wait a minute, you just saw that their original investment was $2.2 million. So how do you like that financial trickery? Oh, don't worry, I'm investing in this company. Here's $2.2 million. Okay, now my fee for investing in this company, $2.25 million. So you already have an instant profit, and immediately you don't care what happens to the company. Now, if there's more profit, great. But so, more fees, $950,000 a year in quarterly advisory fees. They're in bankruptcy. They're not paying anybody. They're still paying Bain Capital these advisory fees. But wait a minute. How good could their advice have been if you went bankrupt? And why are you paying the consultants who drove you into bankruptcy while you've got all these creditors who are getting screwed? Okay. Now, here's one of my favorites. They convinced the company to do a restructuring of their debt so that they could get $17 million out. Now, in order to do that, they had to pay an early withdrawal prepayment penalty, of course, to Bain, $2 million. So forget the $17 million, that's money that went to the company itself. They had to pay $2 million to pay them early. Now, if you pay your debt late, that's another fee. If you pay your debt early, that's a $2 million fee. No matter what you do, fee. In fact, by the end, Bain garnered over $10 million in 5 years. Now remember, their original investment, only $2.2 million, so they made a tremendous profit. So what happened in the company? Let's take a look. Well, investors lost $15.7 million, the company got shut down, and the employees lost all their jobs. Bain lost the $2.2 million in investment, but they made $10 million in fees, so they had a gain of $7.8 million while everybody else got screwed. All the employees, all the investors, everybody lost everything, except somehow magically in that failure and bankruptcy, Bain, who was managing it, proud to be managing it, brags about managing it, drove them into bankruptcy and made $7.8 million doing it. Now, Bain didn't lose money on all their companies, and oftentimes they made tremendous profits for their investors, and sometimes the companies would go into bankruptcy and the investors would make money anyway. But no matter what happened, the company does well, the company goes bankrupt, Bain makes a tremendous amount of money because they rigged the system in their favor.
Private equity leaders getting rich at the expense of American workers.
Their greed was only matched by their willingness to do anything to make millions in profits. Nothing was spared, nothing mattered but greed. Mitt Romney became CEO of Bain Capital the day the company was formed. His mission? To reap massive rewards for himself and his investors.
He's for small businesses. No, he isn't. He's not. You want to be on the hit list, you know that.
Romney took foreign seed money from Latin America and began a pattern exploiting dozens of American businesses.
They fire people, they cut benefits, they sell assets.
I feel that is the man that destroyed us.
I am intimately familiar with how our economy works.
Everything corporations earn ultimately goes to people. So, where do you think it goes? Whose pockets? Whose pockets?
A story of greed, playing the system for a quick buck. A group of corporate raiders led by Mitt Romney. More ruthless than Wall Street. For tens of thousands of Americans, the suffering began when Mitt Romney came to town. The company was Bain Capital. Its CEO and president, a privileged son of a wealthy businessman and politician, Mitt Romney. He had a Harvard pedigree and he was on a tear, making spectacular returns. Stripping American businesses of assets, selling everything to the highest bidder, and often killing jobs for big financial rewards. One stop on Mitt Romney's quest, Marianna, Florida. For more than 50 years, the UniMac Corporation had steadily built an American workforce, becoming the largest commercial laundry equipment manufacturer in North America.
It was pretty much a family-ran organization.
Everybody knew everybody, and they cared about their employees. Everybody was in it for the quality, trying to build a good product.
They met with everybody, pulled everybody together, and told us we were being sold to Raytheon, and which in turn turned out to be Bain.
Bain took control of UniMac.
One of the first things that they did, start cheapening the product.
So you'd have to hurry faster through your work, and the quality was going down. It got to the point where we would run out of parts trying to push so many out that sometimes we'd send a machine out without a part on it.
According to New York Magazine, Romney's Bain colleagues had a high disdain for American businesses and their workers, describing them as sloppy and lazy. One of the very first orders of business for Romney's Bain team, slash paychecks while keeping the workers in the dark.
We were worried that we weren't going to have a job, and then at the very end, they decided to shut the doors.
Romney and Bain upended the company and gutted the workforce. Now they were ready to make a handsome profit.
They did sell us. We were sold to
a teachers union out of Canada. What does teachers know about wash machines?
Romney and Bain's sale to the Canadians netted a whopping 230% profit for Romney and his investors. The deal left behind a trail of wreckage.
I'm convinced that if you want to create jobs, it helps to have had a job. And I've had jobs, and I'll use that experience to help America.
They never could get enough. No matter how much they already had, They just could never get enough money.
For an economy to thrive, there are a lot of people who will suffer as a result of that.
Romney and Bain's cash rampage would ultimately slash jobs in nearly every state in the country, like popular children's toy seller, KB Toys. Romney and Bain bought the 80-year-old company in 2000, loaded KB Toys with millions in debt, then used the money to repurchase Bain's stock. The debt was too staggering. By 2004, 365 stores had closed.
All the latest toys to choose from. Hot, we got a KB.
The company is shutting down all of its stores.
The Attorney General is advising people to cash in those cards as soon as possible. As we told you just yesterday, the toy chain has filed for bankruptcy.
Romney called it creative destruction.
Creative destruction does enhance productivity. For an economy to thrive, and as ours does, there are a lot of people who will suffer as a result of that.
Romney and other top executives take $120 million. By 2009, the debt accumulated under Romney was too great. KB Toys was no more.
Make a profit. That's the name of the game, right?
Mitt Romney and Bain saw a 900% return on their investment. Romney and Bain's profits, at the expense of 15,000 jobs, was described by the Boston Herald as disgusting. It was called the Bain Way. Romney's Bain Capital almost always managing to turn the misfortunes of others into their own enormous financial gains. A striking example of this was a technology company Bain financed, with facilities in Texas, Colorado, and California. The company was called DDI. With help from friends at Wall Street's Lehman Brothers, Bain was set to offer an initial public offering of stock in DDI. Lehman Brothers would issue a buy rating, and Romney and Bain would watch investors swarm. A signature of Romney's Bain Way strategy, employees were quickly fired in order to pump up profits. Helped by a favorable rating from Bain's Wall Street friends, DDI's 12 million share IPO raised a quick $170 million. People were buying into the promise that DDI was headed to become a billion-dollar company. Then, instead of sticking with the stock, Bain dumped it. Just after 6 months, Bain sold shares, making $39 million. Then they dumped the rest, just 4 months later, collecting $54 million more. All the while, the Wall Street banks they hired gave cover, issuing glowing reports. DDI ended up losing $400 million. A little over 2 years later, the stock was nearly worthless. The result? DDI filed for bankruptcy. 2,100 jobs were lost. Average investors without insider connections were left with huge losses. Romney denies being involved with the controversial deal, claiming to have left Bain to lead the 2002 Olympic Organizing Committee.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Mitt Romney.
But SEC filings prove otherwise. During the DDI deal, Romney is listed as a member of the management committee of Bain Capital, with control of over 1.3 million shares of DDI Corporation. Sure enough, the probe uncovered evidence that Lehman Brothers continued to encourage investors to buy DDI stock, even though they had misgivings themselves. Romney's Bain Way model played out over and over. Employees, creditors, and investors were hurt. But not Bain. Even though time and time again thousands of jobs were lost, investors and creditors were out hundreds of millions. Romney and Bain made piles of money. The vicious cycle would play itself out this time in America's heartland.
Marion used to be such a booming town.
We used to be a town full of industry.
We were just like all family out there, you know.
Really?
And it changed.
That's about right.
Overnight, it changed.
It sure did.
In 1992, an interesting prospect appeared on the Romney-Bain radar. A paper company called Ampac with plants in Holyoke, Massachusetts, Buffalo, New York, and Marion, Indiana. The potential was there for Romney and his investors to reap a bonanza of cash, perhaps over $100 million.
I think this company knew when they come in, they had no intention of keeping us.
And they told us we'd been bought by Ampac and that we were all fired. Well, they said Ampac Corporation, but the guy that was in charge of the Ampac Corporation at that time was Mitt Romney.
A plant's been in Marion all those years and been sold the different times that we have. And we always went on the same. And then we have this company that comes in and destroys everything that we ever worked for.
Romney's hatchet men moved in, firing some, rehiring others, slashing paychecks. While keeping a smaller workforce, Romney and Bain began executing a scheme the New York Times called Getting Back Your Bait, extracting hundreds of millions for himself and Bain investors by running up extraordinary debt.
A political misstep for Mitt Romney after he tells a crowd of unemployed workers that he's unemployed too.
It's really easy to be unemployed when you have millions of dollars.
Their livelihoods was there. They were making a good wage. And this company comes in and they knock it all away. They knock their wages down. They take their jobs away. And then eventually they close the plant.
Like people were losing homes and, you know, and the money they had saved, you know, they had to use it up. So, you know, to survive, to live.
For Romney, it was a score. Romney and Bain went on to make over $100 million from Ampac.
They wanted the machinery, they didn't want us, and that's what they got.
They could care less about us the way I see it.
Everything corporations earn ultimately goes to people. So, where do you think it goes? What? Whose pockets? Whose pockets? People's pockets. Okay.
To Romney and Bain Capital, it was just another deal. To others, it was a pit of despair.
Mitt Romney and Bain took a hit to their reputation, but not their wallets. He and Bain investors pocketed about $100 million.
Romney had made himself rich beyond imagination. He went on to purchase a $3 million home in New Hampshire with a private beach, and a $12 million beachfront property in California. Even that wasn't enough.
Romney is planning to bulldoze his $12 million, 3,000 square foot home near San Diego, California, and replace it with an 11,000 square foot home instead.
And that hurts so bad to leave my home because of one man that's got 15 homes.
Mitt Romney is now personally worth somewhere over $250 million. Mitt Romney's company, founded with some wealthy Latin American investors, is worth $65 billion today.
I mean, just look the man, he seems like an all right guy. Just look at him. People that didn't know him would think, hey, this guy's okay. But okay, let's look deeper. Let's look deeper in his life.
There are a lot of reasons not to elect me.
No matter how much they already had, they just should never get enough money.
Not meaning one bit of what he's saying.
25 million people don't have jobs and can't find jobs. And
Wall Street free! Wall Street free! Wall Street free!
Okay, next question. We got another question? worked harder than ever before and put in longer hours. Or when you lost that job that paid $22.50 an hour with benefits, you took 2 jobs at $9 an hour.
Not meaning one bit of what he's saying.
SCM. Mitt Romney's firm bought the company and fired all 350 workers. Now some former workers talk about Romney's business practices.
He's cut our wages to put money back into his pocket.
You're not creating jobs, you're taking them away from us to put money in your pocket.
He just wants to take money out of your pocket, put it in his.
Is capitalism really about the ability of a handful of rich people to manipulate the lives of thousands of other people and walk off with the money? Look, I'm for capitalism. I'm for people who go in to save a company. I'm for people who take real risk. But if somebody comes in, takes all the money out of your company, and then leaves you bankrupt while they go off with millions, that's not traditional capitalism.
As Tim Dickinson at Rolling Stone uncovered, Bain Capital's parent company, Bain & Company, ran into serious financial problems in the late 1980s. And Mitt Romney was tapped to try to save the company. The company owed more than $30 million to a bank that had been taken over by the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. After failing again and again to get the company back on track, Romney decided to play hardball with Bain's creditors, basically forcing them to write down Bain's debt. Romney gave everyone a take-it-or-leave-it deal. Take 30 cents on the dollar on every dollar that Bain owes, or he would loot the company, divert whatever remaining assets were there toward paying big executive bonuses, then declare bankruptcy, and then Bain's creditors, including our government, the FDIC, would get nothing. That hardball worked. The FDIC agreed to take just a fraction of the money that Bain owed them and forgive the rest of the debt. Huge bailout for Bain. Since FDIC is a government agency, that debt write-off amounted to a multi-billion-dollar bailout courtesy of you and me, the taxpayer. Bain & Company survived. Bain Capital went on to make a boatload of money, taking over companies, loading them with debt while stripping them to the bone, offshoring American jobs and pocketing huge profits. Romney went on to earn more than $250 million managing Bain. And now he's running for president, all thanks to that government bailout. But while the 1980s government bailout of Bain secured the American dream for Mitt Romney, the millions of Americans who got screwed by Wall Street during the housing crisis never got bailed out.
Mitt Romney signed a $75 million investment in a company called Stericycle, which disposes of medical waste, including fetuses from abortions. That would make Mitt Romney an abortion profiteer in the eyes of abortion opponents. Romney successfully evaded questions about this during the Republican presidential primary campaign because he claimed to have retired from Bain Capital before Bain made the $75 million investment in Stericycle. But 9 months after Romney supposedly retired from Bain Capital, he was listed as both an active participant in the investment in Stericycle and held, quote, share voting and dispositive power over the investment.
What do you make of this salon story about Bain's investment in a for-profit health company that has a history of neglect and wrongful death lawsuits, and that only got worse after Bain took over the company or invested in the company?
It's an important story, Tom, because in 2006, when Bain bought this company, what started happening is the quality and safety issues started to erode to where stories started emerging about overcrowded conditions, understaffing, undertrained individuals running these places, underfinanced facilities. But what was happening is people were dying because of it. This is a company that's been sued numerous times for just absolute abuse and neglect. Now, the reason it's an important story, The reason it comes back to Romney is Romney's still making money on this company. See, what people miss, Tom, is that when Romney left Bain, he had an agreement to where he could make as much as the average has been anywhere between $400 and $1.2 million a year just on spin-off companies. Understands he has 48 accounts still with the Bain Corporation. But this company is important. I mean, this story is important because they've been sued so often. They've had so many regulatory hits, and for Romney to say, I didn't know about that is absurd.
Yeah, well, and also, I mean, Republicans are saying, well, you know, he's just a businessman. Shouldn't we be questioning what a presidential candidate is profiting from, especially if people are dying?
That's right. It comes down to this basic question. Don't we judge the character of the person who's running for president according to the character of the corporations that they connect themselves with?
Tax havens, offshore accounts, carried interest. Mitt Romney has used every trick in the book. Romney admits that over the last 2 years, he's paid less than 15% in taxes on $43 million in income. Makes you wonder if some years he paid any taxes at all.
You know what? I put out as much as we're going to put out.
What is Mitt Romney hiding?
We give 10% of our income to our church every year. Do you think that is the kind of person that is trying to hide things or do things? No. He is so good about it.
Why not show that then? Why not?
Well,
why not
you know,
release because then it's a moot point.
Because there are so many things that will be open again for more attack. And you just want to give more material for more attack. And that's just the answer. And we've given all people need to know and understand.
He seems like an all right guy. Just look at him. People that didn't know him would think, hey, this guy's okay. But okay, let's look deeper. Let's look deeper in his life.